Avengers Endgame is the highest grossing MCU and just superhero movie of all time. And while many people talk about how well it ended the stories of Iron Man and Captain America and Phase 3 in general, the Infinity Saga, it is also said that, ultimately speaking, that was also the beginning of the end, the beginning of the slide of the MCU and the decline of the actual entire universe. And the reason why is very simple, because while it did a great job again of ending Phase 3, that wasn't the only job that the movie actually had. Endgame couldn't just end the Phase 3 Infinity Saga, it also had to catapult the next phase into motion, had to set up all the new characters of the next phase, and unfortunately the movie of Endgame completely failed to do that. What's up, Tiger Pack? It's your boy Black Tiger Talks back with another video. And in this video, I want to talk about how Endgame really failed to set up the rest of the MCU Phase 4 and onwards. So the major thing which you realize is that when it comes to Endgame, it failed to set up several key things, 3 key things to be more specific. It failed to set up, first and foremost, any new major A-list characters. When it comes to a lot of the MCU and the way that it typically works, when it comes to any Marvel, not just Marvel, but any universe, cinematic universe or otherwise, you need to have a couple of key central players that are the stories are built around, the major stories built around these few key players, these A-listers, so to speak. And what Endgame did, unfortunately, it got rid of all of its A-list talent on its entirety of its roster without building up more A-list talent in its place. If you look at their A-list talent they had beforehand, you get people like Captain America, people like Thor, people like Iron Man, and of course you ended those stories. You ended Iron Man's story, you ended Captain America's story, and you did those very well. But you had to set up ways for the next couple characters to become the next A-list characters. So you had a couple A-listers still there, Hulk and Thor. And let's be honest, when it came to the A-list characters that they had within the movie, Hulk, Thor, Black Widow, Hawkeye potentially, all these characters were destroyed by that movie. They were completely ended. Hawkeye was ended the same way that Captain America and Iron Man were ended in. It was a nice little send-off to his character. He's done, he's retired, he's outside of the Avengers game. He's no longer a superhero, essentially. He's retiring. And that's perfectly fine. So for Black Widow, they killed her off, which is not a terrible idea, ultimately speaking. The terrible idea of it is that you already had a movie in the works. If you already had a movie in the works, and movie has come out after Endgame, then why would you kill off the character beforehand? Now there's no tension in talking about that movie at all, because you already know what's going to happen. That movie should have came out before Endgame, before even Infinity War in the first place. It should have been a movie that came out way before this time, so that it didn't ruin all the tension after seeing that she's already died. After she died, it was already too late to bring her any type of movie, any type of character arc. Nothing really would work after that, ultimately speaking. And when you compare that again to the other characters they had, the other 2 characters they had were Hulk and Thor, and both those characters are characters that they completely destroyed. Use wrestling terms, they buried both those characters. Thor was buried by the idea of Fat Thor. Fat Thor killed whatever little aura that Thor had left. Every single bit that he had gained from the whole "Bring Me Thanos" scene, which had just catapulted him into the sky. He could have been the next guy after that scene alone. Fat Thor came and destroyed all of that, completely wiped all that aura off the board, leaving him in a worse state than he was even inside of the original Phase 3. When you look at like Thor Dark World, he's actually worse than he in Endgame than he is in Thor Dark World. So ultimately speaking, you completely destroyed any momentum that Thor had, making him no longer an A-list character, dropping him to B-list, and honestly, some people would say even beyond that. Ultimately speaking, you completely destroyed every bit of what Thor could have been. You did the same thing to Hulk. That smart Hulk thing completely destroyed Hulk. After that, Hulk couldn't recover from that. I mean, I won't say you can't recover. I think there's a way to recover it, but you ultimately ruin the momentum. And this thing is, it's not just Endgame's fault. Infinity War did a great job of ruining momentum as well. You know, with the whole Hulk getting whooped by Thanos and then Hulk being scared to come out afterwards. Destroyed whatever momentum that Hulk had left. Hulk has been losing momentum since Avengers, honestly. Since after the Age of Ultron. The fact that he lost to Hulkbuster, even though it's necessary within the story, did make him lose some momentum, made him seem less like a credible threat. And then you have him get destroyed by Thanos. You have that beforehand with Ragnarok, where he's basically considered almost a puppy. He's not really a threat in that movie whatsoever. There's no rage monster you feel. There's more like a 2-year-old child with super strength. You know, nothing scary about that at all. It doesn't really get the fullness of what Hulk is supposed to be. So yeah, you destroyed Hulk, you destroyed Thor, and ultimately speaking, you had very few other guys you could have really focused on out of your main A-list guys. But perhaps you might say, while we might have destroyed Thor, Hulk, we might have killed off Black Widow, we might have, you know, taken Hawkeye out of it, at least we had a couple new characters rising up that we could have really focused on. And unfortunately, that's not entirely true either. You see, Endgame did a great job of not just destroying those legacy major A-list characters, but did a great job of destroying the momentum of a bunch of other characters coming up afterwards. If you look at characters like, again, the guys who were coming up would have been someone like Vision. You kill Vision off in Infinity War, fair enough, that makes perfect sense. But other characters like Doctor Strange, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, like Scarlet Witch, I actually will say Scarlet Witch, they did a good job of actually giving her momentum. They just ruined that in Scarlet, you know, what's not WandaVision, what's it called? They ruined it in WandaVision, but ultimately speaking, you have to give her some momentum, so she could have actually been fine. But the other characters I just mentioned, the momentum was thrown off the charts, just completely destroyed. Someone like War Machine. This is a great opportunity to make War Machine that person, and you destroyed any momentum that War Machine had. Captain Marvel's momentum, her momentum is completely destroyed, mostly by her movie, but also by Endgame. Endgame didn't give her any character, didn't give her any reason for the viewers to really like her. That was the best opportunity to push Captain Marvel, make her the next big person, and they failed at that. They gave her 3 or 4 scenes, and most of the time she was just considered not a really great character. She was kind of really stiff. The scenes that were really not well shot, they didn't really give her any character. They didn't really make her seem super powerful. Not in a truly good way. There's ways you can make a character feel powerful that feels good. There's ways you can make a character feel powerful that seems terrible. I remember I was talking to one of my friends about this, one of my female friends, after the movie, and she was saying that she hated Captain Marvel after this movie. And I was like, why? She barely was in it. And what she said is that Captain Marvel took moments from other characters. This is the time for other characters get these moments, and then she just jumps in and takes them. The idea that she just, you know, the whole rain fire scene is going on, Thanos is shooting up the battlefield, and as Captain Marvel comes down and saves everyone, she hated that because, like, she didn't earn that moment. It's like, that moment could have been a moment that actually Captain Marvel could have earned if you actually let her be in the movie. She was barely in the movie. She barely did anything but besides being basically a plot device. So ultimately speaking, the chance to push Captain Marvel, it was destroyed by that movie. They completely bungled that entire situation. So you bungled Captain Marvel, but you didn't just bungle her. You didn't give someone like Falcon, who's supposed to be the new Captain America, to set him up for the next situation. You didn't set him up at all. You can't give him nothing, essentially. Now, of course, the idea is that the Falcon Winter Soldier show would set him up better. We all know how that turned out, but ultimately speaking, if you know this is going to be the end, you got to set up, you know, Falcon a little better. You got to set up War Machine. War Machine was actually in the entire movie. If he's going to be the next guy, the next, like, not Iron Man, but you know what I mean, he's going to take that role as far as he's going to be the one to inherit most of Tony's money, is able to kind of fund the Avengers in the future. He already has a good look. Already talked about how well good War Machine is in many different videos. I'll put them in the description. Regardless, War Machine is a character that really could have been put forward as the next guy if you really wanted him to be put forward as the next guy within that movie, but they didn't do that. In fact, War Machine is practically useless in the entire movie. You can't think of a single good War Machine scene in that movie, not even one, and that's a crying shame. And the same thing goes for the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy, I'll admit, in the first place, none of them were really guys you could have pushed in the first place. All of them were kind of a package deal, so to speak. They're one of those teams that you can't just launch someone from that team. No, that team is the team. Without the team being together, it just doesn't work. So you didn't even have the opportunity to watch those guys. I'm not really going to get on them for that. But those other characters, you could have launched them. Captain Marvel, could have launched her. could have launched again someone like Thor or whatever. You could have kept that going, but instead you failed to launch all of those characters. But there's one major other character that you forgot to launch that's even more important. The final character that they failed to launch within this movie, which is kind of important in my opinion, is they failed to launch another villain. When it comes down to it, now this is of course a problem you could say that's the overall Phase 4's fault, but ultimately speaking, this is in the end of Infinity War, end of Endgame. You have the most people watching you'll ever probably have. This is the perfect time in which, in the final, maybe after credit scene, maybe even like way after credit scene, you could have added in something to push the next villain, to make the next big thing. Unfortunately, they didn't really have any plans. It's one of the major problems. It's probably why they had these problems in the first place, but they failed to launch the next big villain. And in fact, we didn't know who the next big villain was for like I think a year or two afterwards, we finally heard that Kang was the guy. And again, that's us as fans hearing that Kang is the guy. That's not them showing the casual viewers who are the people who actually, they're the majority, the people who came to make the film, one of the highest grossing films of all time. You have to get the casual viewers in there along with the fans. And ultimately speaking, they failed to launch someone like Kang the Conqueror, the next big villain. They failed to let this guy be known as the next big guy. And that's such a major problem, of course, because if you think about the Avengers movies, each of the Avengers movies, even though they're about the specific film in that movie, they usually launch the next guy. So the next guy throughout the entirety of Infinity Wars and the Infinity Saga was Thanos. The first movie, Loki was the main villain. What do we do at the end of the movie? We launch Thanos. In fact, the entire movie was more launching Thanos, trying to make it out to be this guy's the next big guy. He's coming, he's going to attack and kill basically the entire Avengers. That was the idea. Age of Ultron did the same thing. Tony had that, vision from Scarlet Witch. And then on top of that, we ended with the classic, iconic quote, "Fine, I'll do it myself," as Thanos grabs the Infinity Gauntlet. You have this idea that this guy's coming, he's going to destroy everything we have in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's going to be an absolutely powerful destructive force. And instead of actually pushing again Kang the Conqueror in a similar way, it just didn't do anything with him. Like, it's utterly terrible the way that they didn't use this opportunity, even after credits, even a simple thing to kind of make this guy to be the next big guy. It's a complete lack of planning. So when you look at it completely as a movie, Endgame did a solid job of ending the stories of, Iron Man, of Captain America, even of Hawkeye, honestly speaking. When it came to launching the next generation, the next phase of the MCU, it completely failed at that. It destroyed your A-tier legacy characters like Thor, Hulk, Black Widow. On top of that, you destroyed most of your new and up-and-coming guys like Captain Marvel, War Machine. At least you failed to even give them a push on the greatest stage they're ever going to have. And then on top of that, you failed to push your next new villain. You failed to make that guy out to be a real threat. You didn't even have him in the movie at all. You made it seem like all is well in the situation, which of course now is going back to bite you in the butt. Again, I don't think that this is necessarily a major problem with movies. I think movies can just end normally, but if you're making a cinematic universe, it is your job to basically have teasers and basically make sure the next big thing is the next big thing. It's kind of like, I've been using a lot of wrestling terms here, professional wrestling. They gotta make sure that you know who the next big guy is, who the next John Cena, Roman Reigns, Randy Orton, so on and so forth. You gotta make sure you know who the next big guy is. And you have to tease these guys. And ultimately speaking, when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they completely failed. And with Endgame and trying to push these guys, it's the biggest stage you're ever going to have. $2 billion in revenue. Millions of people saw it. It's the biggest cultural event that you're ever going to have, biggest stage you're ever going to have. And instead of pushing the guys you need to push, instead of making sure that the Phase 4 and onward, we're going to be, excellent. At least we're going to have a good launching point for that. Instead, you kind of started back at zero for no apparent reason. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that Endgame and the MCU ever made. But that's just my thoughts. What are your guys' thoughts? Leave a comment down below, subscribe, like, share the video, all that YouTube jazz. I thank you guys for doing that in advance, and again, just thank you guys for continuing with me on this YouTube journey. And I'll cut it there and stop rambling, but until next time, stay ferocious, Tiger Pack.